right? And then what I'd like to do now is bring on someone who is he is our rabbi. He is someone with great perspectives on life and politics and religion and culture and the Bay Area and California. It's true. He's one of our favorites. How about it for John Rothmann, everybody? Yeah. Hey, John Rothmann. Happy New Year.
Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
We got to unmute John Rothmann.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Am I unmuted now?
There you go.
Yep.
Now you're gloriously unmuted.
The last thing you want as a radio talk show host is to be muted. I'll assure you. Following Spencer Christian is always a tremendous joy. And Kim, I will be listening avidly to your extended.
I'm sure that you will. Yes.
Everything Rothmann says sounds so. And Kim, I will be listening avidly to your newscast at 11. You sound like
avidly is a ding word, I think.
Borderline. I'll ding it if you want. All right. I don't know. But John, it's great to have you in the mix always. We're really exploiting you because the crowd loves you, and it's terrific to have you in. But now I'll exploit you for some knowledge. The things that are coming out, I'd love to talk about anything in California, first of all, or I'd like to put it aside for now, but I'd like to get to that. Anything that you feel we should focus on. There may be stuff that you feel is sort of getting lost in the wash a little bit in terms of California politics or California concerns. But I wanted to get to some of the J6 revelations that have come out, even as they've wrapped up their report and even as Congress changes hands. I wonder if you could tell me what things, the Meadows revelation, I think, is pretty significant, that he was burning documents at a pretty good clip, particularly after, it would appear in an effort to cover up what was a conspiracy. And this is a clear obstruction of justice. So that's one thing that landed in the last day or so. What other things, and tell me about that as it lands for you?
Well, begin with Mark Meadows. If, in fact, he did burn documents in the White House, in the Chief of Staff's office, it is a monumental abuse of power, an obstruction of justice. And Meadows, who I would remind you is a conservative, he was a member of the House of Representatives, one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus. If he did that, then I believe we have a real problem with the conservatives. Mark Meadows is emblematic of a huge problem in the conservative movement today. And that is, can you respect honesty and integrity? What does it mean for Donald Trump? I think Donald Trump is on the decline. The reason he's on the decline is his own situation, the way he handles things, the way he treats people. And we are seeing that. I thought that the revelations were particularly significant, and now we have to see what the follow-up is. Remember that next week, the Republicans take over the House of Representatives. The January 6th committee has folded. It means that everything is now with the Justice Department. And I've been a great defender of Merrick Garland. You will recall over the last several years, a lot of my listeners, your listeners, and callers have suggested that Merrick Garland was a failure. He was going too slowly. And the reality is what he's done is to build a solid, substantial case. And the question is how the Justice Department will carry it forward. And Mark Meadows, I would remind you, is really in contempt of the January 6th committee. And now we know that when I think about burning documents, I always remember when Richard Nixon was advised to take all the tapes and burn them on the White House lawn.
Yeah, Pat Buchanan told him to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so did Spiro Agnew.
No, right.
All I can tell you is it's if that's not a ding word, I don't know what is. But I'm going to tell you that it is shocking. And what is more disturbing to me is I alternate what I listen to in terms of news. Fox has made this a non-story. And that is what is particularly disturbing. You cannot have major implications of a White House chief of staff burning documents in his office in the White House and not have it covered. CNN, I think, has done a good job. MSNBC has done a good job. But it is the partisanship of Fox, which I find particularly disturbing. May I give you one other example that really irritated me the other day? They were talking about the scandals involved in the cover-up by a congressman-elect who has claimed so many things that aren't true. It's unbelievable.
Santos, yeah.
Just unbelievable. And one of the commentators on CNN tried to divert it and say, well, Joe Biden did the same thing.
No.
And I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with these people? Do they have to create that delusion and illusion of quid pro quo. So that was the other thing. Santos, by the way, is a disgrace, but there is no requirement in being elected to the House of Representatives that you be honest or have any sense of integrity. And so
that's exactly right.
And
I mean, yeah.
Let me point out quickly. I don't want to. You've got questions, I know, but
no. I just wanted to follow up, but in a second. Go ahead.
That the reason that the Republican leadership is so quiet about this is because, as you know, next week the Republicans will assemble to elect a new leader who will inevitably become Speaker. But the problem is that there are 5 members of the Freedom Caucus who are saying they will not vote for Kevin McCarthy. And if he loses Santos, this disreputable fellow, he's really in trouble. So this is expediency over honesty and integrity, and is emblematic, I think, of part of the problem. Let me point out, to be fair.
Well, expediency is a ding word, and emblematic, which you've used twice. I will ding twice.
Thank you.
Okay,
the
go ahead.
Democrats
Yes.
have the squad, and I've been equally vocal about their lunacy. But let me say that when it comes to the Republicans, they have their group as well, the Freedom Caucus. And let me remind you that the former White House Chief of Staff found burning documents, we are told, was a member of that Freedom Caucus and one of its leaders. So,
I do want to just put, for those who may have missed it, this is the testimony, okay, that was released by the J6 committee that we didn't see, okay, but you in the original iterations, which would be a ding word, of the committee's work, roughly a dozen times. This is a quote from Cassidy Hutchinson. Roughly a dozen times I remember seeing him, Mark Meadows, and it was when we would have the General Service Administration staff come light it first thing in the morning. He's talking about the fire. And then they had logs next to his fireplace and his closet, too. Throughout the day, he would put more logs on the fireplace to keep it burning throughout the day. And I recall roughly a dozen times where he would take the fireplace cover off and then throw a few more pieces of paper in when he put more logs on the fireplace.
That's wild.
Yeah, she describes in detail. And she then says, she points out, I mean, this young woman who's really sacrificed a lot, and she's at both personal expense, meaning literally she's had to pay for representation, and also at personal expense in terms of reputation and the way they play like mobsters on the right, unfortunately. They'll dox you. They will come to your house. They will, you've seen how brutal it can be. It's standing protocol, this is Hutchinson speaking, it's standing protocol, I believe, for previous and future administrations, too, for record-keeping purposes. The Presidential Records Act only asks that you keep the original copy of a document. However, I don't know if the documents Meadows burned were the first or the original copies of anything. It's entirely possible that he had put things in his fireplace that he also would have put into a burn bag. They were duplicates, maybe, of an electronic copy. Is there high ground, I guess is what I'm asking you, John Rothmann, for Meadows? Might he be able to skate on this? In other words, after everything you've just said, all of which I could sign on to, I think, for the most part, what is the real effect? You've already said that he's in contempt. Nothing's going to happen as a result of that. What might happen realistically as a result of these revelations?
Well, there could be something that happens. If the Justice Department brings obstruction of justice charges to a grand jury, he is really in trouble. But I want to say a word about Cassidy Hutchinson. I am so impressed by her. Now, I've never met her. I don't know her. I have read what you have read. She really, she hit a home run in terms of revelations, honesty, and integrity. And let me remind you, she was, if you will, at the bosom of what was going on January 6th. And she has been completely honest and candid, in my judgment, has not been caught in any lies or disingenuous statements, and was trusted by the Republican leadership. And that should be the real clue. The question becomes, why is there such silence by the Republicans? Can't they confront and admit that something nefarious has happened, and that, in fact, a former president of the United States is obstructing justice, tried to subvert the election process? And yes, I will be very clear. He committed sedition. And that is, I think, in the end, what is important. May I make one other quick comment before we go to other issues? And that is, watch what is happening in Georgia. I believe that there will be an indictment of Donald Trump by the Attorney General's office in Georgia. It's a state matter because clearly they have him on tape suggesting that the Secretary of State cheat. And the Secretary of State, who I had on my show, and I think you've had him on your show, has made very clear that he is telling the truth, and he is a Republican. He is a committed Republican. And so these are.
I just want to find 11,000.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean he's a Trump's an old school mobster, kind of like steps around some of the verbiage that would really get him into trouble. But on this one, I think the record is replete with evidence of issues. I think Lindsey Graham is involved in this as well.
Yeah, well, he has been now compelled, although he tried to appeal the matter, he has been compelled to testify, and that will be interesting too. That's why I'm spotting several things. The Georgia case is critical. What the Justice Department is doing is critical. And I have to tell you, the revelations coming from the January 6th committee are trickling out because there is massive testimony. And as this proceeds, it's really going to be something. The sad thing is that the January 6th committee is finished. And Kevin McCarthy has made clear that he is going to punish people, including Adam Schiff, a Democrat who served on the January 6th committee. They're going to strip them of committee assignments. They're going to do a tit for tat. And
sure.
One of the things that I will be watching this next week is the question of whether Kevin McCarthy can or will become Speaker of the House. Will he become the leader of the Republicans and ipso facto become the Speaker? And let me tell you what a disgrace that would be. The man is without any ethics or morals as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I mean, who would you pick from the right who wouldn't consider a disgrace? I mean, he's running in a weak field, I guess is what I would say.
Well, he is going to be challenged, and you will note the challenge to McCarthy is not coming from the center of the Republican Party. It's coming from the right of the Republican Party. And that, to me, is also very disturbing if there is no middle of the Republican Party.
I guess that's what I'm saying. And it's just, I just don't know. It's a rogues gallery. This is the word from the chat that I thought was interesting. Indirect. The coup d'etat will take place and be finished January 3rd. Anything related to January 6th will never be heard of again. Benghazi will be the name of the game. That's just a reflection of what you're talking about, which is that there'll be political recriminations and essentially a new agenda, which will be to go after political rivals. That's literally going to be the order of business.
The difference, Mark, is that although the investigation by Congress may be over, the Justice Department investigation is just beginning. And everybody needs to understand Merrick Garland is a man of tremendous integrity. He is a man who has proven himself to be even-handed in terms of his approach. And whatever attacks they may try to make against him, the facts, I believe, will speak for themselves. And so I believe in the next few weeks and months, we are going to see everything really come out. And one other quick comment, that affects the Republican field in the race for the presidency of the United States. I think Donald Trump's candidacy is already a failed candidacy. Key supporters of Trump are withdrawing their support. And although he could theoretically take a third of the Republican primary vote, he might even do well in certain cases. The question then becomes the opposition. Who will be the emerging opposition? DeSantis, by the way, is a very weak, in my judgment, potential nominee.
And why do you say that?
His record in Florida, his dealing with matters from COVID to teachers to Disney. I mean, one thing after another. We could go into it, frankly, hour after hour. His record.
I'd love to discuss that with you. I mean, I hate him. I think he's a very dangerous guy. I never hate. Well, I do. That's all I do, John. That's all. All the hating you don't do, I do, John. Yeah, I take the hating you don't. I go by your house. I pick up your hate and I bring it to my house. How's that? How dare you?
Why
not
are you yelling?
Hate?
Why are you yelling?
Yeah. I hate to think of the implication. Is what I
but I loathe him. I think he's a very dangerous guy. But this is interesting that you don't see him as a strong candidate, since he's viewed as the next viable candidate, might be the way to put it, because if Trump falls away. Vile and viable.
Tim deserves a ding for that.
Yeah.
Maybe people want to move their hate and place it over on DeSantis. So you see, if Trump is not a viable candidate, as you say, and there's still all this anger and vitriol and kind of ugliness floating around, then maybe he's the next successful part in that.
He has a problem, and the problem is that Donald Trump is attacking him, which means that the Trump base is now going to view DeSantis with some cynicism. If I were looking at people, I would look at Asa Hutchinson, who I think is going to run. I would look at Chris Sununu, who I think is going to run. I think there are a lot of possibilities, none of which are acceptable to me in terms of my own politics. Let me quickly point out to you, there is no requirement, by the way, that the Speaker of the House of Representatives be a member of the House of Representatives. And so there was a suggestion made the other day that if all the Democrats got together with a few Republicans, maybe Liz Cheney could become Speaker of the House. It's not going to happen. We've never had a situation where a non-member of Congress has been elected Speaker. But the other
Plus,
thing,
she's loathed by a lot of the constituencies to which you've referred in this conversation. I mean,
absolutely.
she doesn't have the, if the Republicans got together, the one thing they got together on is that they hate Liz Cheney. You know what I mean? So it would be a bridge too far.
She still sets a Republican agenda.
Of course. So, no, I'm not a fan of Liz Cheney either. There's this sort of the enemy of my enemy is my friend that went on for a long time that somehow Kinzinger and Cheney are our pals when they're perfectly happy with these Supreme Court appointments, for example. I mean, this is the right-wing agenda is embraced by those Republicans on that J6 committee. Just because they went after Trump and seem to have some sort of sense of where magnetic north is, doesn't make them cool politically as far as we're concerned.
May I suggest one other thing to watch is the tension between Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy. And I want to see how that plays out because there has to be coordination between the Republicans in the House and Senate in order to get any legislation passed. The Supreme Court decision, which we just found out about yesterday, which was again a one vote, but Neil Gorsuch switched over and voted with the Democrats on that. And that has to do with the question of whether or not various restrictions imposed during the Trump years can be lifted. It's going to be an interesting time.
Oh, that's for sure.
Can we roll back to the destruction of White House documents for a moment?
Yes.
Because I'm left thinking that if nothing is going to happen to former President Trump for keeping them in a storage unit over here and the kitchen basement over here at Mar-a-Lago, then what's going to happen to Mark Meadows if it is shown that he destroyed the documents? I mean, clearly we don't really have a respect for these documents anymore, right?
Look, that's another question. And I would say that the other great vulnerability that Donald Trump has are the documents which he took from the White House. And again, you have to go back to Hutchinson's statement. She made a very interesting statement about the number of documents that were being moved. All of these things are on the table. They're not going away. And when you have an attorney general like Merrick Garland with such tremendous integrity, I think Donald Trump should be a very worried man. And I haven't even mentioned the problems he has with his own businesses and so forth in New York. That's a whole other
and tax issues as well. John will be a regular here. He said he'd love to come by. He'd love to come by on a regular basis, and that's really, really cool. We're excited about that, John. I love your takes, and the audience loves seeing you too. People are asking, do you have a podcast of your own? I know you've talked about this, and when you do get it together, if you do get it together, you can announce it here, and everybody will subscribe. And
may I wish everybody a very happy, healthy new year. It's a particular pleasure to be able to participate in this podcast. I love seeing Kim McAllister, and if I may be so bold, Mark, I even love seeing you.
Aww,
John Rothmann, everybody. I love it. Thanks, John.
Happy New Year, my friend.
Do you feel it? It's the Mark Thompson.